Yo, what's up? Welcome to Man Up Friday with me, your host, Mike the Mentor. Appreciate you guys being here tonight. Got a whole bunch of signals going off on this thing here. I'm going to apologize for any background noise. Got a dog walking around and some sprinklers going off in the yard. But I got some good stuff for us tonight as we continue to explore the topic of manhood. And there's not really going to be a long introduction because I want to jump into the content because it's so good tonight. But just for the people who are new to this page, all this teaching comes from The Quest for Authentic Manhood by Dr. Robert M. Lewis. And this is what we teach out of, or what I'm teaching out of. And it's good stuff as we look at this question of manhood and what that means. Especially for me and my own story of not growing up with a father in my house, on having to figure out all this stuff for myself, what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a father, what it means to be a good member of society, what it means to hold myself to a higher standard and the higher calling on my life as a man. So we are taking a look at these things every Friday for the entire year of 2019. So appreciate you being here, and let's jump in. All right, so we are got this week's session is called Genesis and Manhood, Part 2, and we're going to blaze through this review of last week. So last week we talked about Genesis 1 and what it says about manhood and how it speaks of male and female value, how we're both created in the image and likeness of God, and God alone bears this image. We all have a consciousness, will, reasoning, and self-determination, and that's what separates us from any other creature on this planet, and that we're both equally endowed and equally valuable. We're unique and we have a special relationship with God, and it speaks of male and female calling. We're supposed to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. We're supposed to subdue the earth, which means wherever we go, we do the best with what we have. We have to rule over the earth, which means we're supposed to be good stewards over the earth and its resources, right? Take care of what's been given to us. And this is where we find the calling of man. It also hints at a very important social structure, which is headship versus leadership, which I talked about last week in detail, and I've talked about in other videos on this page in detail. If you just go back on this page and search, you can learn all about that if you don't know the distinctions on the differences between headship and leadership. Because you can have a woman who's been given a strong gift of leadership, but that's not the same as headship, which is a calling that all men have within their household, and how we honor that and steward that properly. So let's jump into tonight. We are looking at what Genesis 2 says about manhood. And I'm just going to read this verse to you, Genesis 2:7. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. And this isn't about tonight and last week and next week as well, isn't about whether you believe the Bible to be true or not. It is us taking a look at these verses and what they say about manhood, and the elegant truths that they speak to, that I think if you stay with me here until the end, you'll be able to easily identify and relate to as you continue on your journey as being a man. So in Genesis 2:7, we notice that Adam was created first. And the question we have to ask, is this really significant? Because God could have created them both at the same time, right? Adam and Eve. So why didn't he? And I don't know if there's necessarily an answer to that, but I want to propose to you that first always means something special in the Bible and outside of the Bible. And what it speaks to is, it speaks of responsibility and the blessing that comes with that responsibility. Right in the day and age of the Bible, there was a great importance placed on the firstborn son, and the firstborn son got the father's inheritance. But he had to live up to those responsibilities in order to get that inheritance, and that was a model for us. And there were many firstborn sons then and today who give up that responsibility, and therefore, in my opinion, forfeit the blessing that comes with that. So, was God making a statement about social structure, social positioning, and manhood as it should be in this verse? Let's find out. So next, we're going to read Genesis 2:15, which says, "Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it." So you'll notice here in this verse that Adam is given an occupation and a responsibility before Eve's creation. Eve hasn't come on the scene yet. And his occupation, right, is obviously his responsibility is to tend the garden. I guess his occupation would be a landscaper in today's modern vernacular. And these are given specifically to the man, but why? And I'm not saying that it doesn't answer the question. I'm saying it just invites it, right? Like when we're looking at this objectively, this is what we want to ask, right? We don't want to ask if necessarily if this is true or not. That's not the discussion for tonight. It's why. Why would this story say this? Why would it be done this way? And I want to pose to you that perhaps this is the first case of leadership training before Eve comes on the scene. And why would that be important to us as men, as future fathers, as current fathers, as older men with grandsons, and our responsibility to the younger generation? And that's because could this be a model of the father-son relationship and the responsibility of the father to prepare his son for marriage? And I just think about my own life, right, and some of the struggles that I've had in my own marriage along the way, even my relationship with women before I got married, and the things that I was taught and wasn't taught. I mean, one of the only conversations I ever had with my dad was him talking to me about me telling him, or him asking me if I had a girlfriend, and me saying yes. And I think I was 14 at this time, and him saying, why did I want to be tied down to one woman when there were so many beautiful women all across the world? And he told me that when I turned, I think it was either 18 or 21, he was going to take me to a brothel in Las Vegas and let me experience all that comes with that kind of encounter. And immediately I think, who says that to their son, right? But I mean, I get, now that I'm older, I get it's not right, but I get where my dad was coming from. I mean, he didn't know any better. He was a womanizer, and that's just what his idea of women were. And he wasn't a very faithful man. And because of that, and I don't know much of his upbringing at all, but my guess is that he was never shown how to be a father, a good father. And so, in turn, he didn't know how to show me how to be a good father. And he didn't have a clue about how to prepare me for marriage. And now, as my son, who's 18, is growing older, I'm having to take strategic steps and be purposeful in the conversations that I'm having to him about women, about the opposite sex, and having to demonstrate to him each and every day in my own relationship with my wife how a man is supposed to help take care of his wife, how he's supposed to love her, provide for the family, and what that looks like. So I just present that to you, that that this in my opinion, this is a model of the father-son relationship and the responsibility a father has to prepare his son for marriage. Because we all know, those of us who are married, marriage is not easy, but it's the good fight that's worth fighting. And if we're going into battle not knowing what to expect or what that looks like, that's when a lot of things happen. And I think, especially in American culture, we're presented through movies and TV and all of that marriage is easy, right? Like, and that, you know, as a man, you should just come home from a hard day's work and your wife should serve you and do all this stuff, and you shouldn't have to lift a finger, you know, but that's couldn't be further from the truth, right, of what relationship really looks like. And we're not taught any of this stuff in school. So I'll get off that horse and let's move on. So now I'm going to read Genesis 2:16 through 17, which says, "And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in that day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." Right? Did you notice that right there? This instruction was not given to Eve because she's not on the scene yet. That was given to Adam. And later, when Eve comes on the scene, Adam was supposed to give that instruction to Eve. I'll read that one more time. 16, "And the Lord God commanded the man." It doesn't say, "And the Lord God commanded the woman." It says, "The Lord God commanded the man." So, the only Bible. Oh, so we have to ask ourselves, like, why? Why is this important? So what? Okay, like he told him not to. He told the man not to do this, right? And the only Bible that there was at this time, right? Because there was no written word in this story, was the words that God spoke to Adam, and that could be extremely important. And here's why that could be extremely important. Is it's a hint of the spiritual responsibility God created men to assume as a part of real masculinity. And it's stated outright thousands of years later in Ephesians 5:25 through 26. And let me read that. Let me turn to that and read that to you here and kind of bring this full circle. And I think you'll get what I mean. And you've probably heard this verse before, even if you don't know anything about the Bible. But listen to what's said. Ephesians 5:25 through 26. "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word." Right? So in other words, a man should lead with spiritual truth when in a relationship with a woman. And I think that that's an extremely important model that God was giving to us. You know, in a relationship, someone has to deposit the truth and be the standard bearer for it. And that responsibility lies on us as men. And the real question is are we going to exercise that authority and responsibility, and are we going to step up to it? Now, for what's the word I'm looking for? Just to be vulnerable with you guys, I somewhat suck at this, right? I think I do a good job of praying with my family. I think I do a good job or I do a decent job of praying with my family. I do a decent job of making sure that my kids know God, have a relationship with God, and all the stuff that comes with that. But to be honest with you, what I really suck at is at times is just praying with my wife. And I don't know why. I have this mental block about it sometimes, this lack of self-confidence. It's just really weird. So I've been working on that, and I need to do a better job of that. And I just wanted to confess that to you guys. One, so you can hold me accountable, but two, just so you know that, by all means, me going through this stuff is not me saying that I'm perfect and I got it all figured out. But what it is me demonstrating that I too have lack, and there's things that I need to work on, and that God is working on me with. So next, Genesis 2:19. Oh, shut this down, shut this down, shut this down. Okay, 2:19. Okay. Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them, and whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. All right, so here we notice that Adam names the animals, and this is a signal of his leadership over them. And naming in the Bible is significant. It's a sign of authority or leadership over somebody, right? Think of your kids, right? When your kids are born, they don't just name themselves. You give them a name. And I want to argue that there's tremendous significance in that name, and the name that they're given is not by mistake. And you being inspired with that name that you give them is not by mistake. So I will share about me, and I'll share another little secret with you guys about me. I think the majority of you guys call me Mike and know me as Mike, but Mike is not my given name. My full given name is actually John Michael James King, and I think that that's interesting, right? Because I had no control over being given that name. And then there's a story behind that, kind of as to why. Well, I go by Mike because my dad's name was John as well, so it was just easier in our house for me to use Mike, so that there wasn't that confusion that comes with that. But I want to encourage you to look up your name if you don't know what it means. And I have to remind myself time and time of what my name is. So just to give you an idea, so John means God is gracious. And I think that that's very interesting because as I've told my story tons of times on this page, God has been extremely gracious to me throughout my life, despite the mistakes that I've made, despite the wrong that I've done to people. Extremely gracious, right? I shouldn't even be alive today with the things that have happened to me. I shouldn't even be the person that I am with the things that have happened to me. I should probably be bitter, angry, resentful, scornful, and a lot of other adjectives, and a straight up dick. But by the grace of God, I'm not. And I don't harbor any ill will or resentment or any of that stuff towards anybody or towards the circumstances that should have and could have easily let me be those things. So that's what John stands for. Michael stands for who is like God. And that's interesting just from a standpoint of things that people have spoke over me before. But I'm just going to leave that one at that. And then James actually means supplanter. And supplanter means one who takes the place of someone that was there before him. And I was thinking about, like what significance would that name have over me? And God spoke to me, and He showed me a picture of my father, right? And my father as his responsibility in our household growing up. And he walked away from that responsibility, and he left that. So that left a void. And that void was filled by me, right? Growing up, I was always said, okay, your dad's not here, well, you're going to have to be the man of the house. And looking back on that, I find that to be a really interesting coincidence, especially given what James means. So there's a small rabbit trail about names. Let's get back on topic. We also see that God does this with several people in the Bible. One, to signify His authority over them, and two, their calling, right? The calling that they have on their lives. So our names are extremely significant, and they carry a great deal of importance of who we are. And then finally, Genesis 2:18, which says, And the Lord God said, It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Right? And this is when Eve comes on the scene. And I think this is an interesting point that Dr. Robert Lewis makes in this lesson, in that he says, notice the deepest differences between a man and a woman are not physical, but social. And as men, we still feel this today. And we feel this because there's this relational dance going on between two equally endowed and equally valuable counterparts. And the biggest question at the center of masculinity and manhood is, if this is a dance, who leads and who follows? Right? And this is extremely relevant, this story in Genesis, because it plays out every day in our lives. And this is the central question of the 21st century. And we can all relate to this because as a man, it doesn't matter whether you take a girl out on a date or you go home to a wife every night. You deal with this I don't want to say issue, but you deal with this question. You live this dance out in your life during these times, each and every day, depending at what stage of life you're at. So in conclusion, in this moment in Genesis, Adam discovered more than a work to do in the garden. He discovered more than a will to obey. He also discovers a social complement who will not only offer him help, but great help in his life. But is also looking to him and looking at him to lovingly lead her to fulfillment. Right? And this is part of the calling that we have on our lives as husbands. And the question is are we gonna do something about this? Are we gonna answer this calling? And are we gonna honor our wives in this way? So that's it for tonight. I appreciate you being with me. I hope that this was fruitful for you, and going through this and asking these questions is bringing new revelation to your life and to your relationship, no matter what that looks like. And I just want to encourage you to continue to do that work, right? To continue to do that tough work. I know that there's a lot of different men at a lot of different stages in their relationship. Some it's really good, some it's extremely bad and volatile. But as men and the leaders of our homes, and given that responsibility in our relationships, it's our job to step up and to do whatever we can to lead and make that relationship work. So I love you guys. If you need anything, hit me up. Otherwise, see you tomorrow for the Saturday shout out. Have a good night.